I said this on Boston's Big Three, and this came from Roondog exactly, and I'm going to toss this back to you guys. What's the narrative for Russell Wilson? Because Russell Wilson hasn't done anything in 6 years. This team, the Seattle Seahawks, haven't done anything since Super Bowl 49. They haven't been able to even sniff an NFC title game. So I'm wondering what the narrative is for Russell Wilson, because guess what? Your offense wasn't bad. And the defense was pretty atrocious this year. Don't get me wrong. But Russell Wilson made a pretty costly pick six in that game. And I don't know if you guys seen it early in the game where DK was yelling on the sidelines, yelling at Pete Carroll, yelling at Russell Wilson. Get me the ball. Set up the screen. Guess what? They set the screen up for you, DK, and you end up getting pick six right there. Now, I know DK had a nice run, and he ended up scoring a touchdown. He ended up getting off his man and finding the open field. I get that, but if DK now, to me, and I saw this, and I'll steal this from TikTok, he's showing shades of Ocho Cinco T.O., like drama. Like, that's what DK is starting to do now because he knows how good he is. And that's going to end up hurting your team going forward. And Pete Carroll he already lost his defense when they all fucking wanted to leave. You could be starting to lose your offense down the line, too. So what's the narrative, guys, for Russell Wilson?
I think I was listening to, Pardon My Take, the Barstool podcast today or yesterday, and they were talking about this. They were talking about the Seahawks. Everybody kind of looks, they kind of turn the blind eye to Russell Wilson. He's kind of like this little golden boy who doesn't do anything wrong. But I think you have to look at him and Pete Carroll, because at the end of the day, they're the two people in this organization that have the most impact with this team. And consistently, they've come up short, like you said, since the Super Bowl. They haven't been able to get over that. Like, I think it was Stafford and Matthews, maybe they talked about it, but they talked about how they never talked about what happened in Super Bowl 49. They just moved on and whatever. I don't think they've ever been able to get past that mentally. And Wilson, he started off wicked hot, and then towards the end of the season, he threw 28 touchdowns through 8 weeks, and he only threw 12 in the last 8 weeks. And kind of opposite of that, their defense ended up blocking up opponents through the last 8 weeks, sort of. So they really just can't always, gel at the same time. And I put that on Pete Carroll because they say he's a player's coach and whatever, like all this, that's great, but you never have your entire team clicking at the same time. Either you win by 5 points and Wilson puts out 40, or you lose 17 to 12 to the Rams in week 5 of the regular. It's just so weird with them. So I really just think it's a culture thing. And I think you got to point it at Russell Wilson that he's just not the winner, the clutch player that everybody thinks that he is. He's really just kind of a guy that, he'll win you a game now and then, but he's not this. He's not Mahomes. He's not Rodgers. He's not Brady. He can't go out there and win you a game like that.
Yeah.
Now, I said way back in March, probably the first episode of New Guys podcast, I said that Russell Wilson would be the MVP of this regular season. And through the first half of the year, that was looking like a great freaking pick, man. He was absolutely tearing it up. But as those weeks went on in the beginning of the season, it was like, oh, this defense is suspect. They're letting up. I mean, yeah, Seattle's scoring 40 points a game, but their defense is letting up 39 points a game. I'm just throwing out random numbers because one game I point to in specific where I think it went wrong for Seattle was the Buffalo game. Those were two offenses just going at it, and that Seattle's defense just couldn't keep up. And that's what it really came down to at that point of the year. And when that kind of hit, it was like, all right, we got to wake up a little bit. So, and then what am I trying to say right now? Seattle's defense starts going on a tear later in the year. I mean, and then games get closer, right? Because the defense is starting to lock people up, but at the same time, Wilson and the offense isn't putting up enough points that they should be. And we saw that in that 17-12 game against the Rams. Granted, the Rams have a tough defense, and we're going to get into them later because I wouldn't call it a hot take because I'm not sticking to my guns on it, but just a bit of a hypothetical for later on. But you think about it, it's got to be Pete Carroll. I know Tyler Piper was saying in the chat, he's a big Seahawks guy. Fire Pete Carroll. Like, I wouldn't say fire him. Maybe give him another year, man, because you have the pieces. You have the pieces, and I agree with Pat. It's a culture thing in that locker room. DK not getting his targets that he wanted. Hey, I mean, I guess that's why Belichick didn't draft him way back when. Maybe he saw that somehow, and he drafted N'Keal Harry over him. I mean, granted,
it's a good take. It's a great take because if you just look at what DK was doing on the sideline in that game, do you want a talented player? Sure. But does Belichick want to deal with all the other bullshit that comes with it? Absolutely not. He does not want to deal with that.
And that's part of the reason why Antonio Brown was probably out of New England. Belichick saw right through him. He's like a psychic of some sort.
And it was again, it's funny because you'll have a guy like Roondog tell me like, no, Belichick knows that Antonio Brown can do this, this, and this. But it was a Brady move. It was a Brady move to get Antonio Brown. Like you say, he saw right through him and said, see you later. That's it. So, and we won't really truly know what that is, but I mean, has Belichick brung on like characters? Like, he absolutely has. Like Ocho Cinco came to New England, but he was a toned down Chad Johnson. He wasn't a super young second year receiver like DK is. So I think that is true. It's his character. And he probably didn't like his character.
Yeah, and going back to that, we were another thing that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. DK not really being a good football player. I'm not saying he's not a bad football player by any means. He's in the NFL. He's got some going for him. But I know there was an argument earlier in the year about who's better, him or Stephon Diggs, and we talked about it, and I believe we all agreed that argument has been laid to rest long ago. DK Metcalf is more of an athlete. I don't know if Babs has ever heard this. DK Metcalf is more the guy. He's everyone's seen the picture of him looking all buff like that and shit. But you have that versus Stephon Diggs, who has better hands. His route running is better. He's able to. I think he's better in traffic, honestly, down the field. So comparing those two is just, it's not valid for me anymore. And Wilson's playmaking at the same time, I don't know. Some of his decisions are just flat out stupid.
If I'm Russell Wilson, so if I'm Russell Wilson, and we said, what's the narrative? He's kind of turning into an Aaron Rodgers in a way, where you won a Super Bowl and then you go a decade without really doing anything, and that's kind of like Big Ben in a way too. That's kind of where Russell Wilson's going to go right now. He's in limbo, like he's in quarterback limbo. You're in. They're going to be a good team. They're a marketable team, the Seattle Seahawks. But every year that goes by is a year wasted. If I'm truly Russell Wilson, I might go play baseball. I might go hit up that baseball contract because he's still relatively young, and I think that, hey, you can make just as much money or way more money.
More money,
yeah. And go do that and go be a two-sport athlete. You won a Super Bowl. You went to 2 Super Bowls. You done your thing. You done your time. You're forever a legend, Seattle. No one would hate you if you went to baseball and go play for the Mariners or something like that.
I like that.
I think the one thing I'll say on Russell Wilson, because you guys kind of covered, I agree with the indecisive part where he seems to be, more so when he starts scrambling around. He doesn't know whether to throw, he doesn't know where to pass it, run it. And he's kind of in that middle area where he's not a scrambler. He's not just an absolute, he launches the ball or anything like that. So he's kind of in the middle there, and he seems to make the wrong decision more times than he does the right one. But the one thing I'll say is it kind of like the Breeze argument where, Breeze wins the Super Bowl, but for years he then is met with a bad defense, and therefore he can't keep up. He can't keep up every single game, and it's almost like he gets burnt out. You saw it with Christian McCaffrey this past season. Last season he was getting 400 touches, on the season, and then people said, watch out for next year. If you have someone who gets that many, touches in the season and he can't keep it up the next year. Russell Wilson, you have carrying the offense, carrying, the defense, for lack of a better term, for the first, 10 or so games. And he just can't keep it up into the playoffs. And is it really Russell Wilson's fault, or is the fact that every year, since the Legion of Boom kind of got dismantled, he's been met with a pretty lackluster defense? And it's kind of like the Breeze argument where it's like, well, he's good enough to win a Super Bowl every year, but you're just not giving him the help that a lot of, Super Bowl winning QBs actually get.
I think it's a big, I feel like it's an excuse thing with him every year. Like, they haven't gone back to even the conference championship since their Super Bowl appearance, but it's always, all his running backs were hurt last year. Before that, he doesn't have an offensive line. He doesn't have a defense. You go and get Jamal Adams, the guy who's considered like a top 3 safety in the league. And he has kind of like an iffy year. He has a lot of sacks, whatever. That's great. But I think kind of losing my steam here. But Jordan, what you were just saying,
I'll give you a moment to think, but I don't think that Jamal Adams, I'm not here to defend Wilson because I don't really agree that he's going to be this franchise guy, but I don't think going out and getting a top 3 safety and throwing him in the defensive end and saying, look, we helped you on defense. I don't think that's what Seattle needed. They needed like 3 to 4 good pieces to complete the defense. It's not like they were missing. It's not like the Steelers getting Mika Fitzpatrick, where they had a solid building blocks with like, some of the guys they drafted and TJ Watt and stuff. And then you just throw someone in the secondary like that and you're like, okay, this just bolstered it. Adams was kind of like, he's the one guy on that defense where like, yeah, he's really good. It's kind of like everyone else is around you's mediocre. It doesn't really help in the long run.
Yeah, but I get like getting burnt out and you're starting to fall flat because, hey, I'm doing all the work and no one else is doing the work. But if you're a veteran in the NFL, you shouldn't be making mistakes in games. I mean, that pick 6 set the tone for the game because it put them down 13-3, like just early on. And then you have to start crawling out of your own hole that you put yourself into. So like same thing with Big Ben in that game, threw 4 and he had 500 yards, threw 4 interceptions. Like in just in the first play alone, not on the same page with Marquise Pouncey. Like that's your problem, Big Ben. Like that's nobody else's problem. That's not your defense's problem. You guys put yourself in a hole because of your mistakes right away. In the first 2 drives alone, you went down 14-0. So you can't blame the defense or something. So that's the way I look at it in Russell Wilson here in this playoff game, is that you have to blame yourself. The blame is on you. Like you are in control of the game. You are the guy. So it's going to fall on your shoulders.
And that pick 6 he threw was, if you look at the drive previous, you saw DK Metcalf, going back to him, angry on the sideline, throwing his helmet. And that play was a wide receiver screen to DK. And you're thinking, did they just try to force feed Metcalf the ball?
That was my point earlier, that he was yelling on the sideline. And he was like, and I think they showed it. And his words were like, just give me a screen, or like screen, like just throw it to me. And they dapped him. All right, we're going to do it. And they did that play. And good for the Rams to read that. And they knew it was coming. And they got a pick 6. And I mean, now you're down 10. Now you're down double digits, and you have to crawl out of that hole. So
and you can't do that against the Rams defense, who I think is the best defense currently in the playoffs, maybe even in the entire league.
And I mean,
and Aaron Donald went out in the game too, like in the third quarter. So you weren't facing. You had another advantage right there as well too.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to Russell Wilson being kind of this nice guy persona. Where is he too easily manipulated by his receivers or his coach? Is Pete Carroll telling him, all right, you need to get the ball to DK Metcalf? It doesn't matter. Someone like Tom Brady would be like, no, I'm trying to win the game. Is Russell Wilson kind of just like this, guy who you can just throw around and, make him do whatever you want, and it bites him in the ass, a lot of the times in the season.
Yeah. What I'm kind of,
the Patriots should trade and get Russell Wilson here. They should. It's time to leave. Time to leave.
He needs a good coach or something like that.
Send him the 15th. See what they say.
With him, it's like you look at all these other quarterbacks. You look at Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, even like Big Ben, Mahomes. Like there are quarterbacks who, despite their teams' like shortcomings, they can get them to the next round. They can get them to the conference title. But like Wilson just hasn't really been able to do that. I think that's the staple of a franchise guy. Obviously, Wilson's a franchise quarterback. He's great. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. But the staple of like a legendary quarterback is really being able to push your team past its limits. Like, if you're not a contender, you should be able to, like you saw with like the Titans last year, you go further than you're expected. If Wilson can't really do that, if he needs a legendary defense and a semi-stable offense to get to the Super Bowl every year, then he's not really as great as he's hyped up to be.
And here's the thing: you just said this earlier, Jordan, about having maybe the team controls Wilson more than he should be controlling himself, right? So an example was it's 6-3. You play with the score. You play with what you have. You don't force it to then put yourself down in the hole. A good example of this was Super Bowl 53. Tom Brady, out of all people, he didn't play the greatest game. It was the defense. They played to what they had there and what they could do. You didn't see Brady because the one mistake you make costs you the entire game. So Wilson is just out there doing what he wants to do, and like you say, indecisive or making bad plays, making bad passes. I mean, it's like Phillip Rivers all these years too. He was another one that was a complete idiot in that two minute drill at the end of the game. It's just these are the reasons why you're going to lose the game. You lose it. You're the one who's losing it. Whether you're listening to other people telling you what to do or just making stupid decisions to force it, play with the flow. I don't think Wilson's playing with the flow at all.
Yeah, and you talk